I'm doing double duty this morning. If you had a bulletin, you'll see that my lesson this morning was a cup of cold water. Now, probably everybody knows that verse in the Bible, in Matthew 10:42, where it talks about Jesus talking to his disciples and says that anyone that gives a cup of cold water to these little ones. In fact, I'll read it, that way I don't mess it up. And if anyone gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, describing his disciples, because he is my disciple, I tell you the truth, he will certainly not lose his reward. We often read that, and do we really take it to heart? Do we understand it? I know a lot of times when I read the Bible, it always means more to me if I hear a story or I have an example before me of something in real life. The series The Chosen, I've watched pretty much all of them, and I'm not promoting this or anything, but it has a way of helping me to understand that, back then, those people were the same as me. They were no different. They had the same problems, they had the same idiosyncrasies about them and everything, and it made it real to me. Well, I'm going to tell you a story today about someone that made this verse real to me. On June 28, 1778, during the war that basically gave us freedom in this country, at the Battle of Monmouth, Mary Ludwig Hayes was watching her husband, John, go into battle. As she was watching, most of the other wives and girlfriends in that were leaving the battlefield, but she was watching and she noticed, this was on a hot day, about 100 degrees. She could hear cries from the battlefield. Men were dehydrated. They were suffering. So she decided she was going to do something about that. So she goes and grabs a pitcher and goes to the creek and takes a pitcher of water to every man that she can on that battlefield. This is in the heat of battle. Guns are firing, cannons are going off. And she goes to every man that she can and gives them a cup of cold water to revive them. And she's doing this, and she looks up, she sees her husband, John. He's manning the cannon. He's the one with the ramrod. I can't remember if it takes 2 or 3 people to run a cannon. But you have those that put the powder and the ball in, and the guy with the ramrod, he puts it down into the cannon. Then you have the guy that lights it off. He was slumped over the cannon, her husband. She runs to him. He's exhausted. He's dehydrated. She gives him a cup of cold water. He doesn't revive. At that moment, with all this stuff going on around her, she grabs up the ramrod and says, "Load." She did more. She continued the rest of that battle loading that cannon. They say at one time when she was in the process of loading that cannon that one of the cannonballs went through between her legs and ripped her petticoats. She was that close to the battle. Now, we don't remember anyone from that war, but Mary Ludwig Hayes was given a nickname that we might remember, and that was Molly Pitcher. She was named that because of what she did on that battlefield, taking pitchers of water to those men that needed it so badly. In fact, she was recognized so much that actually General George Washington himself issued a warrant as a non-commissioned officer to her. And in 1822, Mary was awarded an honor unprecedented to a female in that era, a military pension for her combat service during the Revolutionary War. You probably will never forget Molly Pitcher after I've told you this story. She's the only one that's really ever remembered from that Battle of Monmouth. But it was her actions that bring this to home. She was rewarded. And as we read in Matthew 10:42, it tells us that we will receive a reward. Those that gave a cup of cold water to the disciples, they would receive a reward. Just as we will receive a reward. She went into that battlefield not with the idea that she was going to fight. She was just going to help out those guys that was in need. But there was a battle going on, wasn't there? How many times do we help out, but we're not aware of the battle that's going on? Do we have that desire or commitment to go ahead and join in the battle? As she did, picking up that ramrod and say, load. She didn't say, what do I do? What do I do? She knew what needed to be done. And she didn't hesitate. She saw the need and she contributed what she could. We have opportunities the same as she did. In our everyday life, we have opportunities to give a cup of cold water, to join in the battle, whatever it might be. God puts in our lives things that we may not recognize because we think, well, who am I? I'm not a preacher, I'm not a teacher, I'm not an elder, I'm a nobody. No, we're not. We are somebody. In God's eyes, we are somebody. There's something that's required of us. We have a duty. And if we look in Luke 17, and this one always gets me because of what it says. In Luke 17, we could start earlier in the chapter there, but I want to read verse 10. Because it's basically talking about a servant plowing in the field. The master comes, he has a servant come in, make him prepare his supper, waiting on him. Would he thank this, starting in verse 9, would he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you have been told to do, should say, We are unworthy servants. We have done only our duty. Now think about that. We've done only our duty if we do what he tells us. Shouldn't we do more? Molly did more. She was giving relief to the soldiers, but when the time came, she gave more. The same as us. The same thing that we have to do. As I said, we don't remember any of the soldiers on that field because they were expected to fight, weren't they? They were there for a reason. They were fighting. But we don't remember them. But we remember Molly because she wasn't there to fight. She could have been just like all the other women on the sidelines, weeping for their husbands, their boyfriends. Oh, how terrible this is. But she wasn't. She was seeing where the need was. And she went and fulfilled it. And then when there was more to be asked, did she faint? Did she say, nope, not me. I'm not qualified to run that cannon. She picked that ramrod up and said, load. She didn't faint from that. Do we sometimes have the attitude that I don't want to get involved because it's too much? I might get hurt. I might suffer a little bit. If I just stay on the sidelines, I'll be safe. We can't have that attitude. It's not what the Lord has asked of us. He tells us we have a battle. He tells us we have a race. We need to be a part of it. Because if we're not going to get that reward that was said to be had in the end. In Matthew 25, we've looked at this several times, and we all know what it says when it talks about the times when people didn't understand. When he was talking about the sheep and the goats, where the Lord was going to separate them. And in 35, the people says, well, Jesus says, for I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, needing clothes and clothed you? When you were sick or in prison, we went to visit you. When? The king will reply, I tell you the truth, whoever did for me one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. Now remember, Molly was out there and she was taking water to not just her husband, not the one she loved. She took it to everyone. Everyone was in need, and she took it to everyone that had that need. If you look at all of these things, hungry, thirsty, naked, alone, in prison, sick, Every one of those maladies is what we will have in our life, isn't it? Pretty much we'll have at least one of those, won't we? I don't know of anybody in here that hasn't been sick. Now, I'm not going to say we've been in prison yet. And I hope nobody has to go naked. Not everybody's been hungry. A few. Thirsty, maybe. But if we do that to the least of these, we're doing it to Christ. Now, I don't know what the attitude of Molly was at that time. I don't know if she was a Christian. She may have read that verse in her Bible back then. She may have thought, yes, they need some relief. But you know what? Today, we've all read that verse. Give a cup of cold water. We have no excuse, do we? When we read something in here, do we just read it and kind of go on? Do we not really take it to heart? Because when I read this story of Molly, I took it to heart. I'm thinking, that's the way I need to be. I need to be aware of who is in need. And then go to them and give them that cup of cool water. Because if we read further in Matthew 25, it tells us those that did not give water when he was thirsty, or food when he was hungry, visit him when he was sick or in prison, clothe him when he was naked. Those that didn't do that, what was their reward? There's going to be a reward one way or the other, depending on what we do and what our actions are. This life is short. It's but a vapor, it tells us, I think in James. It's just but a vapor. I looked out this morning and it was a damp, cool morning and there was fog laying against the river. And in the short time that I watched it, I seen it dissipate. When the sun came up over the top of the mountain, it just dissipated. It was gone. And it reminds me how short my life is. There's times that I think, how much longer does it have to go on? I'm tired. I want to go home. And I think, you know what? In reality, if I lived another 25 or 30 years, that would seem like an eternity to me here, but it is nothing but a vapor compared to eternity with Christ. But we have to remember that that eternity could be on the other side too. And I can't imagine eternity in hell. I can't imagine it. Because sometimes here on earth, it is like that. And I'm thinking this is just a short time. When she said, load the cannon, she took on a burden. She didn't ask for it. She willingly took it on. Do we have that same attitude? Do we have the attitude that whatever God puts in front of us, we're going to take that on? Or do we sometimes want to shirk that a little bit? Say, well, no, that's not what I'm good at. I think a lot of times we have the opinion that we get to pick and choose. this morning in Dan's class in the last part of 2 Thessalonians 3. Verse 13, never tire of doing what is right. I think June mentioned that one. Isn't that so true? Never tire of doing what is right. If Molly hadn't taken up that ramrod to load that cannon, there would have been one less cannon in the fight. One less defense. How many times do we miss an opportunity to take up the ramrod? To take up the sword? This right here, the two-edged sword. How many times do we miss taking that up when we have an opportunity to do it? We think, no, I don't want to bother with that. What if that would have been the case in hers? What if that one cannon would have been the difference of the outcome of that battle? And they'd have lost. That one thing. In Galatians 6, verses 9 and 10, it says, do not grow weary in doing good. In time we will reap a good harvest. Do not grow weary. We have the example of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10. The two that walked on by the man that was in need, the man that was on the side of the road, beaten. Two just walked on by. They missed that opportunity. They didn't want to get involved. The Samaritan came by and he helped him. He gave him what he needed and more. Took him to the town. Put him up. Told the innkeeper, whatever more he needs, put it on my tab. He didn't know this man. He was a nobody. Why'd he do it? For the same reason that Molly went into battle. They were compelled to help. Are we? Are we compelled to be the Christian? To have mercy on those that need? We need to remember, how much mercy did Christ have on us? Remember who we were before we became a Christian. Remember what we deserved before we became a Christian. And it was only because of God's grace and mercy that we can call ourselves children of God. And He tells us what we need to do to become a child of God. It's very clear in this book. So many people just want to take a little portion of it and say, I'm spiritual. I'm righteous. I'm a believer. That's the favorite one today, isn't it? I'm a believer. Is that all you have to do? Just believe? We're reminded that even the demons believed. But it gives us the guideline of what we need to do. And then as Christians, how we need to live our life. And yet so many times we forget that there is other things rather than just basically getting my ticket punched and hey, I'm good. I can do whatever I want now. Grace will cover me. That's not going to cut it. In 1 Peter chapter 1, let's be turning there. Let's start in verse 8. Though you have not seen him, you love him, and even though you do not see him now, you believe in him, and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy, for you are receiving the goal of your faith, the salvation of your souls. If we don't fight the good fight of faith, we cannot take a hold of the eternal life which we were called. If we don't fight the good fight, we can't get a hold of that. We can't receive that goal of eternal life. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a battle. We are living in a country that has been known for its freedom. But as Hubie said in his prayer, it's becoming a lot harder to live here, isn't it? Because of all the stuff that's going on. And it makes me wonder, how long is that freedom going to last? With all the perversion that's going on? When is it going to be wrong to meet? When is it going to be wrong to have one of these in your home? It's like that throughout the world in many places. You can't have a Bible. You can't meet and worship God. Throughout this world, it's a battle. We have not faced it yet here. But are we prepared to go into battle? Are we prepared? We may be giving a cup of cool water, but are we prepared to pick up the ramrod? Too many times it's easy to do the simple things, but when we're called upon to do more, are we willing? If you haven't made a decision to follow Christ, now is the time. Now is the time. While today is still today. Because as I said before, life is but a vapor. And we're not guaranteed one more minute. If there is anyone that has any other need, let it be known as we stand and sing our closing song.